They all believed my stepmother when she wept on television about her violent stepdaughter shattering a priceless heirloom. The judge, our neighbors, even my boss for 5 terrifying minutes. Only my aunt knew the truth. That vase was already broken, already cashed in, and part of a scam that started long before the first bruise bloomed on my skin. Today, I was ready to prove that the woman who beat me over a vase had been smashing lives for years. My name is Lena Hartwell, and the sound of my heels striking the worn marble floor of the Lakefield County Courthouse sounded less like walking and more like a countdown. Click, click, click. The air inside this building always smelled the same. A nauseating cocktail of floor wax, stale coffee, and the sour perspiration of people realizing their lives were about to change for the worse. It was the smell of bureaucracy grinding human hope into fine powder. Outside, the Colorado morning was crisp and bright, the kind of autumn day my father used to love. But in here, the lighting was exclusively cold neon, humming with a low frequency that burrowed right behind my eyes. I pushed through the heavy oak doors of courtroom 302. My hand did not shake. I would not let it shake. I walked past the gallery benches, the wood smoothed down by decades of nervous fidgeting, and took my seat at the defendant's table. I was alone on my side of the aisle. I did not need a hand to hold. Not today. This was a civil hearing, a contest of the will regarding the estate of Daniel Hartwell, my father, who had been dead for exactly 3 months and 4 days. To the court, he was a decedent, a file number, a pile of assets to be divided. To me, he was the man who had tried his best but often failed to see the snakes in his own garden until the venom was already in his veins. The room felt heavy, suffocating. I arranged my notepad and pen with military precision on the table. I could feel the eyes of the court clerk on me. They were used to seeing broken people in this chair. The greedy children, the estranged relatives, the addicts looking for a payout. That was the narrative that had been written for me before I even stepped foot in the state. Then, the doors opened again. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, sucked toward the entrance like a vacuum. Veronica Hale Hartwell made her entrance. My stepmother did not just walk into a room. She curated her arrival. She was wearing a black suit that I knew cost more than $2,000, tailored to showcase her fragility while whispering of her status. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun, highlighting the sharp cheekbones that she usually softened with a smile, but today kept rigid with practiced grief. She looked perfect. She looked like the grieving widow who had been wronged by a cruel world. She glided to the plaintiff's table, flanked by her legal team. Her lead attorney, a man named Colton Reese, who wore a suit slightly too shiny for a government building, leaned in to whisper something to her. Veronica nodded, her movements slow and deliberate. As she raised her hand to tuck a stray hair behind her ear, the light caught the gold bracelet on her wrist. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. It was a braided gold band with small emeralds. My father had given it to her on their 5th anniversary. Seeing it on her skin felt like a violation, a visual claim that she owned him, his memory, and everything he had left behind. She glanced across the aisle at me. It was brief, barely a second, but her eyes were dry and cold. There was a flicker of a smirk. Gone so fast a stranger would have missed it, but I had spent half my life studying the micro-expressions of this woman. She thought she had already won. The bailiff announced the arrival of the Honorable Judge Holloway. We rose. The judge was a man in his 60s with reading glasses perched precariously on the end of his nose, and an expression that suggested he had already heard every lie humanity had to offer. Judge Holloway sat and opened the thick file in front of him. He adjusted his glasses. "We are here for the matter of the estate of Daniel Hartwell. The plaintiff, Mrs. Veronica Hale Hartwell, is contesting the validity of the decedent's final will and testament, citing undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity." Colton Reese stood up, buttoning his jacket with a flourish. "Yes, Your Honor, we intend to show that the deceased was in a state of cognitive decline and was manipulated into altering his estate plan to favor an estranged daughter who has a documented history of instability and hostility toward the family. I sat perfectly still. Estranged, instability, hostility. These were the words they had planted in the paperwork, words that grew like weeds. "The defense," Judge Holloway said, looking toward me, "is representing herself?" "I am, Your Honor," I said. My voice was clear, projecting to the back of the room without shouting. Reese offered a condescending smile to the judge. "Your Honor, given the complexity of the assets involved and the emotional volatility of the defendant, we are concerned about the efficiency of these proceedings. Ms. Hartwell has been unemployed for some time, drifting between states, and lacks the legal acumen to navigate a case of this magnitude. We would not want the court's time wasted by an amateur defending a fraudulent document." The air in the courtroom seemed to freeze. This was their strategy. Paint me as the loser, the drifter, the desperate daughter coming back for a payday she didn't earn. Veronica dabbed at her dry eyes with a pristine white handkerchief, selling the performance. Judge Holloway frowned, looking down at the papers in his hands. He flipped a page, then another. He paused. His eyebrows drew together. "Mr. Reese," the judge said, his voice flat, "have you reviewed the defendant's response filing submitted this morning?" "I have not had the chance to review the supplementary details, Your Honor, but the facts remain." "The facts," Judge Holloway interrupted, looking over his spectacles at the slick lawyer, "seem to be in dispute regarding Ms. Hartwell's employment status and legal acumen." The judge looked directly at me. "It says here, Ms. Hartwell, that you are currently employed by the state of Washington?" "That is correct, Your Honor," I replied. Specifically, the judge read from the page, emphasizing every syllable. "As a senior assistant district prosecutor for the Crescent Harbor District Prosecution Unit, specializing in fraud and financial crimes." Silence dropped over the room like a guillotine blade. Colton Reese froze mid-nod. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He blinked, turning his head to look at his client. Veronica's hand stopped midway to her face with her handkerchief. Her composure cracked. For the first time, genuine shock replaced her carefully constructed mask. She stared at me, her eyes widening. She didn't know. She had believed her own lies so thoroughly, believed that without her and my father, I was nothing but a broken child. She thought I was the same scared girl who fled her house years ago. She had no idea who I had become in the dark. "I am fully capable of representing myself, Your Honor," I said, holding Veronica's gaze. "And I assure the court, I am very familiar with the laws regarding fraud." Reese scrambled to recover. He cleared his throat, shuffling his papers nervously. Well, that is unexpected. But it does not change the core of our argument, Your Honor. A job title does not erase character flaws or a history of domestic abuse." He was pivoting. He was going for the jugular. "The plaintiff contends," Reese continued, his voice rising to regain control of the narrative, "that the defendant coerced her dying father into cutting his wife out of the will. Mr. Hartwell left the majority of his liquid assets in the family home to his daughter, and the remainder to a scholarship fund, leaving his devoted wife with a pittance. This decision was made under duress, and to understand that duress, we must look at the violent nature of the defendant." "Here it comes." I braced myself. "We intend to introduce evidence of a pattern of aggression," Reese declaimed, gesturing toward Veronica as if she were a fragile porcelain doll. "Most notably, the incident involving the Hale family heirloom, a priceless antique vase, the only remaining possession Mrs. Hartwell had from her own late mother. In a fit of rage, the defendant shattered this irreplaceable object and then physically attacked my client when she tried to intervene." "It was a terrifying night," Veronica whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. She shuddered, touching her cheek as if remembering a phantom pain. "I was just trying to calm her down. She was so angry. She smashed it into 1,000 pieces." I sat there, my hands clasped so tightly under the table that my knuckles turned white. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. The vase. They always went back to the vase. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, and I was back there. 19 years old, a sophomore in college, home for the summer to help my sick father. The sound of ceramic exploding against the hardwood floor, the smell of alcohol on Veronica's breath, the way her face twisted not in sorrow, but in pure, unadulterated malice. She was the one who had screamed. She was the one who had grabbed me by the hair. She was the one who had shoved me into the corner of the dining room table, leaving a bruise on my hip that lasted for 3 weeks. I hadn't touched her. I hadn't touched the vase. But when the police didn't come, when the neighbors only heard the shouting, she spun the story. Lena is unstable. Lena broke it. Lena hit me. My father had been asleep upstairs, sedated by his heart medication. He never saw what happened. He only saw the aftermath. His wife weeping over shards of pottery, and his daughter standing there, stunned into silence. He chose the path of least resistance. He chose to believe the tears because the truth was too inconvenient to handle. "Ms. Hartwell?" Judge Holloway's voice pulled me back to the present. I unclenched my hands. "I hear the plaintiff's opening remarks, Your Honor, and I look forward to cross-examining the evidence regarding this alleged incident." "Very well," the judge said, scribbling notes. "We will proceed with opening statements and evidence presentation." I turned my head slightly to the right, toward the gallery behind me. The benches were mostly empty, save for a few bored retirees who treated court hearings like daytime television. But in the third row, sitting with her back straight and her hands folded neatly in her lap, was Aunt May. May Turner, my father's older sister. She didn't look like much to the casual observer. She wore a sensible gray cardigan and reading glasses on a chain. She looked like a retired music teacher, which she was. But I knew the steel spine that held her upright. I knew the sacrifices etched into the lines around her eyes. Veronica had ignored May entirely when she walked in. To Veronica, Aunt May was nobody, just a poor relation from New Mexico, a woman who lived in a small house full of dust and piano scores. Veronica thought May was a passive observer, a relic of the past. May met my gaze. Her expression was serene, almost unreadable, but her eyes were fierce. She gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. My mind flashed back to the night before. We were in my hotel room, surrounded by boxes of documents. I was pacing, panicked, terrified that Veronica's lies were too polished, too well rehearsed. I was terrified that the Vase incident would destroy my credibility before I could even speak. May had grabbed my shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. "Lena, listen to me," she had whispered. "Let them bring up the vase. Let them scream about it. Let them make it the centerpiece of their entire case." "But it makes me look like a monster," I had argued. "It only makes you look like a monster if the vase was real," May had said, a strange, cold smile touching her lips. "I have kept that secret for 10 years. I watched her play the victim. I watched your father pay for it. I watched you carry the shame of a crime you didn't commit. But I have the receipts. Lena, literally, that vase was already broken. It was already cashed in. It was part of a scam she started long before she ever laid a hand on you." Back in the courtroom, the memory of her voice settled my nerves like a shot of whiskey. The lawyer was still talking, using words like tragedy and fear and restitution. Veronica was still dabbing at her dry eyes, acting the part of the saint besieged by a demon stepchild. They thought they were trapping me. They thought the vase was their smoking gun. They didn't realize it was actually a landmine, and they had just stepped right on it. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old wood and floor wax. The fear that had gripped me for the last 5 minutes began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This trial wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about the scholarship fund or the house. It was about the narrative. For years, Veronica had held the pen. She had written me as the villain, my father as the helpless invalid, and herself as the martyr. She had used a broken piece of pottery to shatter my reputation and alienate me from my own father. She had built a fortress of lies on a foundation of ceramic shards. I looked at the judge, then at Veronica. She caught my eye again, and this time, I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I let a small, professional smile touch my lips, the kind of smile a prosecutor gives a defendant when they know they have the DNA evidence in their briefcase. Go ahead. I thought, tell them about the vase. Ms. Hartwell, the judge said. Your opening statement? I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made Veronica flinch. I smoothed the front of my blazer. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, stepping out from behind the table. The plaintiff has told you a very compelling story. It is a story about a violent daughter and a broken heirloom. It is a story designed to evoke sympathy and distract from the facts. I walked toward the center of the room, feeling the weight of the moment. But that is all it is, I continued, my voice gaining strength. A story, and today, I intend to prove that the woman sitting at that table has not only been lying about the night the vase broke, but she has been profiting from its destruction for years. This case is not about a daughter's rage. It is about a stepmother's greed and the long, expensive con she played on a dying man. I saw Veronica's lawyer stiffen. I saw Veronica's eyes narrow. I was done being their scapegoat. I was done being the frightened 19-year-old girl crying in the driveway. I was the prosecutor now, and I was about to burn their entire case to the ground. The first time I understood that love could be transactional, I was 5 years old. The memory does not start with a sound, but with the quality of the light. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, the sunlight does not just shine, it saturates. It soaks into the adobe walls and the red dirt until the whole world feels like it has been baked in a kiln. It was a sharp, golden contrast to the gray uncertainty I felt sitting in the back seat of my father's sedan. We had driven for hours to get there. My father, Daniel, had been gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles looked like white stones. Beside him, Veronica checked her reflection in the sun visor mirror every 10 minutes. She was not looking at herself. She was inspecting a product, ensuring there were no cracks in the porcelain finish she presented to the world. It is just for a few months, Lena, my father said, his eyes catching mine in the rearview mirror before quickly darting away. Just until we get settled in the city, until the new business takes off. You will like it here. You will have space to run. Space, Veronica echoed, applying a fresh coat of crimson lipstick. It is very rustic, good for a child's lungs, much better than the construction dust in Aurora. She said the word rustic the way one might say contagious. When the car crunched onto the gravel driveway of the small, yellow house, I saw her for the first time. Aunt May. She was standing on the porch, wiping her hands on a floral apron. She did not look like the women Veronica associated with. She wore comfortable sandals and a loose linen dress that moved with the wind. My father hustled me out of the car along with 2 suitcases that contained my entire life. He looked like a man trying to outrun a storm. May, he said, breathless. Thank you, I mean it. We just need time. May finished for him. Her voice was different from his, where his was anxious and thin. Hers was deep and resonant, like a cello string plucked in an empty room. I know, Danny, you need time. Veronica did not get out of the car immediately. She stood by the open passenger door, staring at the dust coating her high heels with distaste. She looked at the small house, the overgrown sagebrush in the yard, and the wind chimes made of old silverware hanging from the porch roof. We will send money every 2 weeks, my father promised, handing May an envelope. For food, clothes, whatever she needs. May took the envelope but did not look at it. Instead, she did something no adult had done to me in a long time. She crouched down. She went all the way down to her knees in the dirt, ignoring the dust, until her eyes were perfectly level with mine. She smelled like cinnamon and old paper. It was the smell of baked apples and sheet music. Hello, Lena, she said. She did not smile broadly or pinch my cheeks. She just looked at me, really looked at me, as if she were reading a complex piece of music and trying to understand the tempo. My name is May. I have a piano inside that sounds like rain when you play the high notes. Do you want to hear it? I nodded. mute with the terror of abandonment. "Be good, Lena," Veronica called out, finally stepping away from the car door but not coming close enough to hug me. "Don't be a burden to your aunt. We will come back for you as soon as the penthouse is ready. When you come to live with us, you will have a room with a view of the whole city. You will thank me then." My father hugged me, but it was a quick, fierce squeeze, the kind that is more about the hugger needing comfort than the child. "I love you, Bean," he whispered. Then he stood up, turned his back, and walked away. They got into the car. The engine roared to life, a harsh mechanical intrusion in the quiet desert afternoon. I watched the car reverse, kick up a cloud of red dust, and speed down the road. I waited for brake lights. I waited for them to slow down, to turn around, to wave. They did not. I stood there until the sound of the engine was swallowed by the wind. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was not heavy. It was an anchor. "Well," Aunt May said softly. I looked up at her. Her eyes were rimmed with red, shimmering with tears she refused to let fall, but her mouth was curved into a gentle, brave smile. "I suppose it is just us girls for dinner. I hope you like mac and cheese, because I make a terrible meatloaf." That was how the few months began. The first year was a lesson in the elasticity of time. A week felt like a year when you were waiting for a phone call. Daniel called on Sundays. Usually. The calls were short, punctuated by the static of bad reception or the background noise of a busy life I was not part of. "Work is crazy, Bean," he would say. "The market is exploding. We are building something huge." "When can I come home?" I would ask, clutching the receiver of the rotary phone in the kitchen hallway. "Soon," he would say. "Soon." Veronica was rarely on the line. She was always a phantom presence in the background or an excuse given by my father. "Veronica is at a networking event," he would say, or "Veronica is meeting with the interior designers," or "She is on a business trip to Aspen." She was always becoming something, building something, while I was just waiting. But while they were busy constructing their empire of hollow promises, Aunt May was building a human being. She was a music teacher, and her house was a sanctuary of sound. There were lessons from 3 in the afternoon until 6 in the evening. I would sit under the grand piano in the living room, doing my homework while the vibrations of Chopin and Bach hummed through the floorboards and into my bones. May did not just feed and clothe me. She saw me. When I scraped my knee falling off a bike, she did not just put a bandage on it. She told me the story of how she got the scar on her chin climbing a fence to see a concert, when I had nightmares about the car driving away. She did not tell me to go back to sleep. She sat by my bed and played soft, improvised lullabies until my breathing slowed. She taught me to read sheet music before I could fully read chapter books. She taught me that every note had a purpose, and that silence was just as important as the sound. "Listen to the pause, Lena," she would say, tapping the page with a pencil. "The music happens in the space between the notes. That is where the truth is." One afternoon, when I was 8, I came home from school with a black eye. A boy named Tommy had pushed me off the swing because he said I didn't have a real mom. I had pushed him back. May cleaned my face with a warm washcloth. She did not scold me for fighting. She looked at the bruising skin and asked a question that would shape my entire legal career. "Did he hurt you because he was strong or because he was mean?" she asked. "Both," I sniffed. "And when you pushed him back," she said, dipping the cloth in the water again, "did you do it to hurt him or to make it fair?" I thought about it. To make it fair. "Good," she said, nodding firmly. "Justice is not about being nice. Lena, it is about balance. Sometimes you have to push back to restore the balance, but you never push first. Do you understand?" I understood. Occasionally, the real world, or at least Daniel and Veronica's version of it, would crash into our sanctuary. They visited for holidays. Maybe once or twice a year, they would arrive in a rented luxury car, the trunk filled with brightly wrapped boxes. The visits were performances. Veronica would sweep into the house wearing cashmere and diamonds, wrinkling her nose at the smell of roasted chicken and sage. "Oh, May," she would say, running a finger over the worn countertop. "This kitchen is so quaint. I don't know how you manage in such a tight space. You know, Daniel and I are renovating the guest wing. The bathroom alone is bigger than this entire room." "It serves us just fine," May would say, her voice tight but polite. They brought me gifts that screamed of a lack of intimacy, an expensive doll that was too fragile to play with, a designer dress that was 2 sizes too small because Veronica couldn't be bothered to ask what size I wore, a chemistry set that was meant for a 15-year-old when I was 10. They were buying forgiveness in installments. "When you move to the city," Veronica would tell me, holding court at the dinner table while picking at her food, "you will go to a private academy. We will get you a tutor. You will have to catch up. Of course, public school in the desert can only do so much." "I get straight A's," I said quietly. "In a small pond," Veronica dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. "Wait until you see the ocean, Lena. You will thank me for getting you out of here." I would look at my father, hoping he would defend me, defend May, defend the life we had built, but he just drank his wine and smiled that weak, apologetic smile. "Veronica wants the best for you, Bean. We just want you to have opportunities." Then, after 2 days, 3 at most, they would leave. The emergency business meeting, or the flight schedule, was always the reason, and every time they left, the house felt a little quieter, the air a little thinner. I spent years keeping a bag half-packed under my bed. I spent years rehearsing what I would say when they finally came to take me home. I thought if I was good enough, smart enough, played the piano well enough, I would earn my ticket to the room with the view. I did not know then that Aunt May was quietly cutting back her student hours. I did not know she was taking on extra sewing work at night so she could afford to buy me the braces I needed, because the checks from Daniel had become sporadic and unpredictable. Veronica was managing the finances by then, and checks often got lost in the mail. The breaking point, or rather, the waking point, came when I was 12 years old. It was a Tuesday. We were eating spaghetti at the small kitchen table. The desert wind was howling outside, rattling the window panes. I had been talking about my father again, about how he promised to take me to Europe when I turned 13. "He said we would go to Paris," I said, twirling my fork. "He said Veronica knows all the best shops. I need to practice my French." Aunt May stopped eating. She put her fork down. The sound of silver hitting ceramic was sharp in the quiet room. She looked at me, and for the first time, the mask of cheerful optimism slipped. I saw the exhaustion in her eyes. I saw the anger she kept leashed for my sake. "Lena," she said. Her voice was soft, but it had the weight of a stone dropping into a well. "Yeah?" She started, then paused. She took a breath and reached across the table to cover my hand with hers. Her skin was rough from gardening and piano scales, warm and real. "If one day, if they don't come back for you, what then?" The question hung in the air between us. It was a physical thing, cold and hard. "They are coming back," I said, my voice trembling. "Dad promised. It is just temporary." "It has been 7 years, Lena," May said. She did not say it cruelly. She said it like a fact, like a musical note that could not be argued with. 7 years is not temporary. 7 years is a childhood. I pulled my hand away. "They are busy. They are building a future for me." "I know you want to believe that," May said. "And maybe they believe it too, in their own way. But Lena, look around you. Look at this house. Look at who is sitting at this table." I looked. I saw the peeling yellow paint. I saw the stack of piano music on the sideboard. I saw the woman who had bandaged every scrape, cheered at every recital, and held me through every fever. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I am asking you to look at the choice that has already been made." May said, "They chose their life, and whether they meant to or not, they left you to live yours. You are not a package waiting to be picked up at the post office. Lena, you are a person. You live here. This is real." I started to cry. Not the wailing cry of a child, but the silent, hot tears of someone watching a dream die. May stood up and went to the living room. She came back with a cardboard box. It was an old shoebox, taped at the corners. She placed it on the table in front of me. "What is this?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "These are your drawings," she said. "From when you were 5, 6, 7, every time you drew a picture of your family, you drew 3 people, you, Daniel, and Veronica, standing in front of a big tall building." I remembered those drawings. I had poured all my longing into them. "I kept them," May said, "because I know how much you love them. But Lena, you never drew me. You never drew this house." I felt a stab of guilt so sharp it nearly doubled me over. "I didn't mean—" "Hush," she said gently. "I am not hurt. I understood. You were drawing what you were waiting for. But you can't live in a waiting room forever. It is dark in there, and life is happening out here in the sun." She put the lid back on the box. "I am going to put this on the top shelf of your closet," Aunt May said. "It is safe. It is not going anywhere, but I want you to leave it there. Keep the fantasy in the box. And when you are ready to look at it and see it for what it is, just paper and crayon, you can open it again." She picked up the box and walked toward my bedroom. I watched her go. Her back was straight, her step steady. She wasn't glamorous. She didn't wear silk or smell like expensive perfume. She smelled like flower and rain. She was not the mother I had been promised. She was the mother who had stayed. That night, for the first time in 7 years, I did not check under the bed to make sure my bag was packed. I unpacked it. I put my shirts in the dresser drawers. I put my socks in the hamper. And when I went to sleep, I did not dream of a penthouse in the city. I dreamed of the sound of the piano, playing a song that had no words, only truth. By the time I turned 17, I lived in 2 distinct universes that never quite touched, separated by 400 miles of interstate highway and a tax bracket that felt like a canyon. In Santa Fe, inside Aunt May's sun-drenched, dusty little house, I was Lena, just Lena. I was the girl who practiced piano for 3 hours a day until my fingers ached, the girl who helped grade first-year music theory papers, and the girl who had just landed a full academic scholarship to a prestigious university in Colorado. When the acceptance letter arrived, thick and heavy in the mailbox, Aunt May did not scream. She did not jump up and down. She simply set a plate of warm cookies on the table, sat down across from me, and wept quietly into her hands. It was a pure, cleansing release of a decade of worry. She had done it. She had taken the discarded pieces of a family and built a future out of them. But success, I quickly learned, has a way of summoning people who want to stand in its light. My father, Daniel, began to call more often. The conversations shifted from awkward, 2-minute check-ins to enthusiastic discussions about strategy and networking. He was no longer asking if I needed money for braces. He was talking about internships, law school prerequisites, and the importance of the Hartwell name in the Denver legal circuit. "You are going to be in the big leagues now, Bean," he told me over the phone, his voice crackling with a pride he hadn't earned. "We need to get you acclimated. You need to spend more time up here in Aurora before the semester starts. Veronica is dying to help you get your wardrobe sorted." I didn't care about the wardrobe. I didn't care about the city. But I was 17, and despite everything, despite the abandonment, the silence, the years of waiting, I still had a desperate, pathetic little hope burning in my chest. I wanted my father to look at me and see something worth keeping. So I started spending weekends at the house in Aurora. It was a sprawling, modern structure of glass and steel, cold to the touch and terrifyingly white. Everything in Veronica's house was white. The carpets, the sofas, the curtains. It was a house designed for people who did not bleed, spill coffee, or have pasts. Veronica played the role of the supportive stepmother with the same intensity she applied to her skincare routine. It was a performance, executed with surgical precision. "Oh, Lena, darling," she would say, sweeping into the guest room I was assigned. a room that looked more like a hotel suite than a home. I was just telling my yoga group about your scholarship. They are so impressed. It really reflects well on the family stability, don't you think? She never asked me what I was studying. She never asked me about the composers I loved or the friends I was leaving behind in New Mexico. Instead, she talked about herself. Sitting at the marble kitchen island, watching her arrange flowers that cost more than Aunt May's weekly grocery budget, I learned the gospel of Veronica's martyrdom. You know, I gave up everything for this family, she sighed, snipping the stem of a white lily. When I married your father, I had a thriving career in interior design, but Daniel needed someone to manage the back end of his business. He was drowning in debt. Lena, drowning. I used my own savings to bail him out. I paid off the creditors. I stabilized the ship. She would look at me then, her eyes wide and expecting gratitude. I sacrificed my prime years so that you could have that scholarship money, she added, rewriting history in real time. So that your father could leave something behind. I nodded, sipping water that tasted like charcoal filters. I didn't know how to tell her that my scholarship was merit-based, that it had nothing to do with Daniel's money. I didn't know how to ask why. If she had saved us all, Aunt May had been the one sewing patches onto my jeans for 6 years. But the cracks in her mask were visible if you looked close enough. They showed up in the camera lens. Social media was beginning to dominate our lives then, and Veronica was an early adopter of the curated life. Every time we went out to dinner, or even just sat in the living room, she would stage the scene. Chin up, Lena. Turn to the left. No, not that side. The lighting is bad. Smile like you are laughing at a joke. Good. Click. She would spend the next 20 minutes editing the photo, filtering out the reality until we looked like two glowing, poreless angels. She would post it with a caption like, "So proud of our girl. Family first. Blessed." Once the phone was down, the smile vanished. She would go back to scrolling through her feed, ignoring me completely. I wasn't a daughter. I was a prop. I was evidence that she was a good person. The breaking point, the moment I truly understood the danger I was in, happened at my father's 50th birthday party. The house was packed with people I didn't know. Business partners, neighbors from the gated community, men in expensive suits and women who all smelled like the same floral perfume. I was wearing a dress Veronica had picked out. It was stiff, itchy, and cost $400. I felt like an imposter. Aunt May had driven up for the party. She looked small in the cavernous living room, holding a glass of sparkling water like a shield. I stayed close to her, anchoring myself in her silence. Veronica was holding court near the fireplace, a glass of red wine in her hand. She had an audience of 3 other women, all nodding sympathetically. "It is wonderful that she is doing so well now," Veronica was saying, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "We were so worried for years. You know, troubled childhoods can go either way." I stiffened. Aunt May's hand tightened on my arm. "Troubled?" one of the women asked. "Oh, terrible temper," Veronica whispered loudly. "When she was little? My God, the screaming fits. She used to throw things, break things. I remember once she swept an entire set of crystal glasses off the table just because Daniel told her to eat her vegetables. My blood ran cold. That had never happened. I was a shy, anxious child. I was the kid who cried when I stepped on a bug. "She has calmed down now, thank goodness," Veronica continued, casting a benevolent look in my direction. "But we still have to walk on eggshells. You never know what might set off that genetic predisposition. Her mother was difficult, too." I stepped forward, my mouth opening to object, to scream that she was lying, but Aunt May pulled me back. She didn't pull me toward the group. She pulled me toward the kitchen. The swinging door closed behind us, muffling the noise of the party. The kitchen was bright and empty, occupied only by the catering staff who ignored us. "She is lying," I hissed, my hands shaking. "Why is she lying? I never broke anything." Aunt May turned to me. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked furious, but not at me. "Listen to me," she said, her voice low and fierce. People like Veronica construct a world where they are the hero, and every hero needs a villain. If you are a good, sweet kid who was abandoned by her father, then Veronica is the wicked stepmother who kept him away. She can't live with that version of the story. So, she has to make you the problem. If you were difficult and violent, then sending you away to live with me wasn't abandonment. It was a necessary measure to protect the peace. But it's not true, I cried. Truth doesn't matter to them, May said, smoothing hair back from my forehead. The story matters. Adults are sometimes so afraid to look at the parts of themselves that are ugly that they will rewrite the entire past just to feel comfortable in the present. The door swung open. My father walked in, looking for a refill on his scotch. He saw us standing there, saw the tears in my eyes. "What is wrong?" he asked, his smile faltering. "Having a moment?" "Veronica is telling people I used to break things," I said, my voice trembling. "She is telling them I was violent." My father paused. He looked at the drink in his hand, then at the door where his wife was charming his potential investors. He made a calculation. I saw him do it. He chuckled, a nervous, hollow sound. "Oh, you know how she tells stories. Lena, she likes to add a little drama. Besides," he shrugged, avoiding my eyes, "you were a bit stubborn back then, remember? You cried a lot when we left." "I was 5, I said. "I was crying because you left me." Right, he said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "Well, you are doing great now. That is what counts. Let's not ruin the night, okay? For me?" He walked back out to the party. I stood there, staring at the swinging door. In that moment, something inside me hardened. He hadn't defended me. He had validated her, by calling me stubborn, by dismissing the lie as a little drama. He had given her permission to keep telling it. He had signed off on the fiction that I was the volatile one. Aunt May watched him go, and for the first time, I saw a look of pure disgust cross her face. Later that night, while I was pretending to sleep in the guest room, I heard Aunt May in the hallway. She was on the phone, her voice a hushed whisper. I crept to the door. "I saw the papers. Daniel," she was saying. "You left them on the desk in the study." Pause. $5,000 a month? You have been transferring $5,000 a month to her personal account for household expenses? Pause. I have been raising your daughter on a teacher's pension and $500 a month that you forget to send half the time. Do not tell me things are tight. Do not tell me liquidity is an issue. Pause. I am not asking for the money. Daniel, I don't want your money. But you should know what she is doing. That money isn't going to the house. I saw the credit card statements too. It is going to jewelry. It is going to that lawyer she keeps on retainer for consulting. You are being bled dry, and you are too busy playing the big man to notice. She hung up. I went back to bed, staring at the ceiling. I realized then that I was growing up between two worlds. In Santa Fe, I was a person. I was loved. I was real. In Aurora, I was a deduction. I was a story they told to make themselves feel better. I was a scapegoat in training. The summer ended, the day before I was set to leave for the university dorms in Boulder. I sat with Aunt May on the porch of her Santa Fe house. The sun was setting, painting the desert in bruised shades of purple and orange. The car was packed. My life was in boxes again. "May," I said, looking at the horizon. "Yes, honey? If I go to college and then maybe to law school, are you going to be okay? Here, alone?" It was the question that had been eating at me. I felt like I was abandoning the only person who had never abandoned me. Aunt May stopped rocking her chair. She looked at me, and her eyes were clear and bright. "Lena," she said, "I am not alone. I have the music. I have my students. And I have the knowledge that I did the one thing I was supposed to do. I got you to the starting line." "I feel like I should stay," I whispered, "to protect you." "Protect me from what?" She laughed softly. "From silence? I like the silence. No, Lena, you go. You go, and you become everything they pretend to be. You become real." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "But listen to me," she added, her voice turning serious. "One day, you will need to come back. Not for me. I will be fine. But you will need to come back to face them. Because people like Veronica don't stop. They just change targets. And when that day comes, you make sure you are ready." "I will be," I promised. "Good," she said. "Now, go inside and play me that Rachmaninoff piece one last time. This house is going to be too quiet tomorrow." I played, and as the heavy, complex chords filled the small house, I knew I was saying goodbye to the only safety I had ever known. I was walking out into a world where vases were already broken, and the blame was already assigned. I just didn't know yet how heavy the shards would be. I was 19 years old, a sophomore in pre-law, and naive enough to believe that a phone call from my stepmother meant something had actually changed. The call had come on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the university library, trying to decipher a tort law textbook. Veronica's voice had been thin, trembling, stripped of its usual polished veneer. "It is your father," she had said. "His heart. The doctors say it is atrial fibrillation, but it looks serious. Lena, he keeps asking for you." The guilt was instantaneous and suffocating. I packed a bag and drove the 40 minutes from Boulder to Aurora, my stomach knotting tighter with every mile marker. I thought I was driving into a medical crisis. I did not know I was driving into a meticulously laid trap. When I arrived, the house was silent. My father was upstairs, sedated and sleeping. He looked gray and diminished in the king-sized bed, hooked up to a portable heart monitor that beeped with a rhythmic, synthetic reassurance. Veronica met me in the hallway. She didn't hug me. She looked frantic, her eyes slightly glassy, a glass of white wine already in her hand at 2 p.m. "Thank God you are here," she said, taking a long sip. "It has been a nightmare. The medical bills, the stress. I have been trying to keep everything together, but he is just so stubborn." She led me downstairs to the living room. It was then that she introduced me to the prop that would define the next decade of my life. It sat on a pedestal near the fireplace, bathed in the light of a halogen spot. A tall, blue and white porcelain vase. It looked old. It looked expensive. It looked like something that belonged in a museum, not in a house where people threw coasterless parties. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Veronica said, noticing my stare. She walked over to it, running a fingernail along the rim. "It was my mother's. It is the only thing I have left of her. She brought it over from Europe. It is worth more than this entire house, structurally speaking. But the sentimental value? You can't put a price on that." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I worry about it," she whispered. "With your father sick, and things being so chaotic, if anything happened to this vase, Lena, I think I would just die. It is my heart, right there on the pedestal." I nodded, feeling a strange chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "It is safe here. Veronica, Dad isn't going to knock it over." "No," she said, turning away. "No, I suppose he isn't." The tension in the house that evening was palpable. My father woke up for dinner, groggy and confused, eating soup in the dining room with hands that shook. Veronica hovered over him, not with affection, but with a predator's impatience. After he went back to bed, I stayed in the guest room, trying to study, but the walls were thin, and the acoustics of that modern house were treacherous. Around 11 at night, the shouting started. I crept to the top of the stairs. Veronica's voice was slurred. She had moved from wine to something amber and stronger. "Just sign the papers, Daniel," she hissed. "It is a bridge loan. That is all. We need the liquidity." "I don't understand." My father's voice was weak, pleading. "The accounts. We should have plenty. Why do you need power of attorney over the investment portfolio? I can still sign checks." "You are sick," Veronica shouted, followed by the sound of glass hitting a table hard. "You are sick, and you are not thinking clearly. I am trying to save us. Why do you always make me the villain when I'm the one cleaning up your mess?" "I am not signing it tonight. Ronnie, please, let me sleep." Useless, she spat. You are absolutely useless. A door slammed. Then silence. I went back to bed, my heart hammering. I debated calling Aunt May, but it was late, and I didn't want to worry her. I told myself I would intervene in the morning. I would talk to my father when he was lucid. I would ask to see the papers. That was my mistake. I thought I was dealing with a financial dispute. I didn't realize the script had already been flipped. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was quiet. I went downstairs to make coffee, my mind rehearsing how I would confront Veronica about her drinking. I walked into the living room. I stopped. The vase was gone from the pedestal. It lay in 100 jagged pieces on the hardwood floor. Blue and white shards were scattered like confetti. It looked like a bomb had gone off inside the porcelain. I stood there, blinking, my brain trying to process the physics of it. The pedestal wasn't tipped over. The vase hadn't just fallen. It looked like it had been thrown. Oh my God. The voice came from behind me. I turned. Veronica stood in the doorway of the kitchen. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair disheveled, her face pale and puffy from the alcohol the night before. But her eyes were sharp, terrifyingly sharp. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I didn't do anything," I said, my voice jumping an octave. "I just walked in. It was like this." "Liar," she hissed. She stepped into the room. I heard you thrashing around down here. I thought you were just getting water." "I just woke up." I backed away as she advanced. "Veronica, I didn't touch it." "You spiteful little brat," she said, her voice rising to a scream. "You are just like her. You are just like your mother. Crazy, violent, destructive." I froze. She had never mentioned my birth mother before. My father never spoke of her. "What?" "Your father told me," Veronica sneered, closing the distance between us. "How she used to smash plates when she didn't get her way. Bad blood. Lena, it is in your veins. You couldn't stand to see me have something beautiful, could you? You couldn't stand that I have something of my mother's when you have nothing of yours." "Stop it," I said, tears springing to my eyes. "That is not true. I didn't break it." "Look at this," she screamed, gesturing to the shards. $50,000. My mother's legacy. Gone. Because you are a jealous, unstable little girl." She lunged at me. I wasn't a child anymore. I was 19. I was 5'7". But when she grabbed me, I reverted instantly to a terrified kid. She didn't slap me. She grabbed my upper arm, her fingernails digging into the tender flesh of my bicep. Her grip was shockingly strong. "You are going to pay for this," she shrieked, shaking me. "You are going to pay for every single piece." "Let go," I yelled, trying to pull away. She didn't let go. She shoved. She threw her weight forward, hurling me backward. I stumbled, my feet tangling in the rug. My hips slammed hard into the sharp corner of the heavy oak dining table. The pain was white-hot and sickening. It radiated down my leg and up into my ribs. I gasped, crumbling to the floor, clutching my side. "Veronica." My father stood on the landing of the stairs. He was holding the banister with both hands, swaying, his face ashen. "What is happening?" he wheezed. The transformation was instantaneous. It was like watching a demon shed its skin to reveal a martyr. Veronica dropped to her knees amidst the shards, burying her face in her hands. She let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "She went crazy, Daniel," she sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "I came down. I saw her holding it. She was shaking. I tried to take it from her, and she just threw it. She threw it on the ground." I looked up from the floor, clutching my throbbing hip. "Dad, no, that is a lie. She attacked me." "She came at me," Veronica cried, pulling her robe tighter as if to protect herself. "Look at her. Look at her eyes. She is manic. She tried to hit me when I yelled at her." My father looked at the broken vase. He looked at his wife, dissolving into puddles of grief on the floor. Then he looked at me. I was 19, but I was on the floor. I was crying. I was holding my side. To him, I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a mess. I looked like the troubled child Veronica had been whispering about for years. "Lena," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment and exhaustion. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Dad, I didn't," I screamed. "She shoved me. I am hurt." "Go to your room," he said, turning away. "Just get out of my sight. I can't deal with this. My heart." He clutched his chest, leaning heavily on the rail. Veronica looked up at me through her fingers. For a split second, the sobbing stopped. She looked at my bruised arm, then at my father's retreating back. Her eyes were cold, triumphant, and utterly dead. I didn't go to my room. I scrambled to my feet, the pain in my hip making me limp. I grabbed my purse from the chair where I had left it. I ran. I ran out the front door, leaving it wide open. I ran down the perfectly manicured driveway, gasping for air, the morning sun blinding me. I didn't stop until I reached the house 2 doors down. The Millers lived there. They were a retired couple who walked their golden retriever every morning at 7. They were on their porch, drinking coffee, when I stumbled onto their lawn. "Lena?" Mrs. Miller put down her mug. "Honey, what is wrong?" I was shaking so hard I couldn't speak. I just held out my arm. The bruise from Veronica's grip was already blooming. 4 distinct finger marks, turning purple against my pale skin. "She hit me," I choked out. The vase. She said I broke it, but she shoved me into the table." Mr. Miller, a retired dentist with a gentle face, came down the steps. "Come inside. Lena, sit down. Martha, get some ice." They sat me on their floral sofa. Mrs. Miller brought me a glass of water and an ice pack for my hip. I pulled up my shirt slightly to show them the impact site, a dark, angry welt right on the hip bone. "That is not an accident," Mr. Miller said grimly, looking at my arm. "Those are grab marks." "She told my dad I was crazy," I whispered, the shock starting to give way to hysteria. "She told him I did it. He believed her. He believed her over me." "We heard shouting," Mrs. Miller said softly. "We were in the garden. We heard a crash, and then we heard her screaming. It sounded rehearsed, dear, like she was performing for an audience." "You have to call the police," Mr. Miller said. "No," I panicked. "No police. My dad. His heart. It would kill him. Please, just, I don't know what to do." "Call your aunt," Mrs. Miller said firmly. "The one from New Mexico. You told me about her once. Call her." I called Aunt May. I don't remember much of the next 6 hours. I remember sitting on the Miller's couch, staring at the wall. I remember the throbbing in my hip turning into a dull, constant ache. Aunt May arrived just as the sun was beginning to set. She had driven 6 hours straight, breaking every speed limit in 2 states. She didn't knock. She walked into the Miller's house, thanked them briefly, and then came straight to me. She looked at my face. She looked at my arm. She looked at the way I was favoring my left side. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She went very, very still. It was the stillness of a predator deciding how to kill its prey. "Can you walk?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Good. We are going to the urgent care clinic, not the one near the house, one across town." "Why?" "Because we need a paper trail," May said, her voice like ice. "We need a doctor to write down contusions consistent with forceful grabbing and blunt force trauma. We need pictures, dated, signed." "Are we going to the police?" I asked, terrified. May paused. She looked toward the door, in the direction of my father's house. "No," she said. "Not today. Your father is sedated and weak. Veronica has had all day to poison the well. If we call the police now, it becomes a, he said, she said, domestic dispute. She will say you were having a mental breakdown. She will say she was restraining you. And with your father backing her up, you will lose." She helped me up. "We are going to document this," Aunt May said, guiding me to her beat-up sedan. "We are going to keep the medical records. We are going to keep the photos. And we are going to wait." "Wait for what?" I asked. wincing as I climbed into the passenger seat. For her to make a mistake, May said, starting the engine. People like Veronica always get greedy. She got away with this today. She thinks she has won. She thinks she has a story she can use against you forever. She put the car in gear and looked at me. We won't forget this, Lena, but we won't speak yet. Let her tell her story. Let her spread the lie that you are unstable. Let her think you are weak. She pulled away from the curb, leaving Aurora behind us. Because when we finally tell the truth, May whispered, it is not going to be a defense. It is going to be an execution. In the weeks that followed, I learned through the grapevine, cousins, family friends, what Veronica was saying. The story had mutated. It wasn't just a broken vase anymore. I was bipolar. I was violent. I had attacked my stepmother in a psychotic rage. I stayed in Santa Fe. I healed. I went back to school. I studied evidence law with a new, burning obsession, and every time I looked at the faint scar on my hip, I didn't feel pain. I felt patience. I knew that Vase had been the beginning of the end for me, but Aunt May knew something I didn't. She knew the game had only just started. For the next 5 years, I built a fortress out of case files and court procedures. I graduated from law school near the top of my class, driven by a terrifying, engine-like need to be unassailable. I became a prosecutor for the Crescent Harbor District Prosecution Unit, a jurisdiction far enough away from Aurora that nobody cared about my last name. I spent my days putting fraudsters and domestic abusers behind bars, channeling my own unresolved rage into closing arguments that juries found captivating. I was trying to bury the girl who had been shoved into a table. I was trying to bury the shame of the Vase incident, which still felt like a scarlet letter branded onto my skin. But while I was running away from the past, Aunt May was quietly, methodically excavating it. I did not know this at the time. I thought May was just gardening and teaching piano lessons in Santa Fe. I did not know that she had turned her small guest room into a war room. May was not a lawyer, but she possessed the patience of a woman who had spent 40 years teaching children how to play complex scales. She understood that if one note was off, the whole composition was suspect. It started with a box of old photographs. May told me later that she had been clearing out the storage shed in her backyard, looking for holiday decorations, when she found a plastic bin labeled Daniel Miscellaneous. It was junk my father had dumped on her years ago during one of his moves, things Veronica deemed too cluttered for their pristine white house. May sat on the concrete floor of the shed, sifting through dusty albums and loose Polaroids. There were pictures of my father from college, pictures of me as a baby, and then a stack of photos from the early days of Daniel and Veronica. She stopped at one photograph. It was a candid shot, likely taken by my father. Veronica was in the kitchen of their first apartment, laughing, holding a glass of wine. She looked younger, softer, less manufactured, but May wasn't looking at Veronica. She was looking at the background. On the counter behind Veronica, sitting next to a pile of unopened mail, was the blue and white porcelain vase. But it wasn't whole. In the grainy detail of the photograph, a large triangular chunk was missing from the rim, and a hairline fracture ran down the belly of the ceramic. Next to it on the counter sat a tube of industrial adhesive. May turned the photo over. The date stamp on the back was from 14 years ago. I was 5 years old when that picture was taken. May sat in the dust and felt the world tilt on its axis. The narrative that Veronica had sold to the court, to the neighbors, and to my father was that the vase was a pristine, priceless heirloom that I, the violent stepdaughter, had destroyed in a fit of rage when I was 19. But the photo proved the vase had been broken 14 years before I supposedly touched it. It was the first loose thread. May pulled it, and the whole tapestry began to unravel. She went back to the boxes of financial documents my father had sent her years earlier, the ones he had mailed by mistake when he was trying to hide assets or shuffle papers during a stressful tax season. May had kept them, sensing they might be important. She spent nights at her kitchen table, reading through bank statements and insurance policies with a magnifying glass. She was looking for a specific pattern, If the vase was broken in that photo, but appeared whole on the pedestal the night I visited, then Veronica had either fixed it or replaced it, and if Veronica loved that vase as much as she claimed, she would have insured it. May found it on page 42 of a homeowner's insurance policy manifest from 7 years prior. Item 412. Antique Delft porcelain vase. Appraised value. $50,000. May dug deeper. She found a correspondence file from the insurance company, and there, buried between a claim for hail damage and a receipt for roof repairs, was a claim settlement letter. The date on the letter was 3 years before the night I was accused of breaking the vase. The letter read, "Regarding claim number 8920, we have approved the payout for the accidental destruction of the insured item, antique vase, due to structural failure during cleaning. Enclosed is a check for the full appraised value of $50,000. May put the paper down. Her hands were shaking, not with age, but with a cold, hard fury. The implication was monstrous. Veronica had broken the vase years ago. She had filed a claim. She had collected the $50,000 the insurance company had paid out. But instead of throwing the shards away, Veronica had glued them back together, or perhaps bought a cheap replica to serve as a stand-in, and placed it back on the pedestal. She had kept a broken, cashed-out object on display for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. And I was the moment. When she shoved me that night, when she screamed that I had destroyed her mother's legacy, she knew the vase was already legally worthless. She knew she had already been paid for it. She used a piece of garbage to frame me, to destroy my relationship with my father, and to paint herself as the victim of a violent assault. It wasn't just a lie. It was fraud. It was a long con played out on the body of her stepdaughter. May took every document, the photo, the policy, the claim letter, and made 3 copies. She took the originals and placed them in a blue folder. She bought a small fireproof safe, bolted it to the floor of her closet, and locked the blue folder inside. She didn't tell me, not yet. She knew I was fragile. She knew I was barely holding my new life together in Crescent Harbor. If she had shown me the proof then, I might have collapsed under the weight of the injustice. May needed me to be angry, not sad, so she waited. But she didn't stay silent with everyone. As my father's health began to decline rapidly in the months leading up to his death, May began a campaign of quiet pressure. She couldn't visit him often. Veronica made sure of that. But she could call. "You need to look at your will. Danny," May would say to him over the phone, her voice low. "It is taken care of. May," he would wheeze, sounding exhausted. "Veronica has handled everything with the lawyers." "Veronica handles things that benefit Veronica," May pressed. "Do you remember that vase? The one Lena supposedly broke?" "I don't want to talk about that," he said. "It upsets my heart rate." "She claimed it on the insurance. Danny, 3 years before Lena came home that summer, she got $50,000 for it. Did she put that in the joint account?" Silence on the other end of the line. Long, heavy silence. "That is not possible," my father whispered eventually. "She loved that vase." "Check the records. Danny, just check, and ask yourself, if she lied about the vase, what else is she lying about? What is she telling you to sign when you are too tired to read the fine print?" I don't know what my father did after those calls. I like to imagine him, late at night, waiting until Veronica passed out from her Chardonnay, creeping into the home office. I like to imagine him finally opening the drawers she told him not to touch. What I do know is that 2 weeks before he died, I received an email. It was from a private address I didn't recognize, but the subject line was just, "For my bean." I opened it in my office at the courthouse, my hand hovering over the mouse. "Lena, I am tired. I have been tired for a long time. It is easier to believe the person sleeping next to you than to admit you have been sleeping next to a stranger." May told me some things. I didn't want to believe her, but I looked, and I saw things I cannot unsee. I cannot fight her. I don't have the strength left to scream, but I can do this. Attached is a new draft of my will. My attorney, The one I used before I met her. Helped me file it yesterday. It is sealed. It leaves the house and the liquid assets to you. It leaves the remainder to the Mary Hartwell Scholarship Fund. Your mother's name. Veronica gets the statutory minimum required by state law, and not a penny more. I know she will fight you. She will say I was crazy. She will say you forced me. But you have to fight back. Lena, you have to win. Believe what you saw that night, not what she told me. I am sorry I didn't believe you first. Love, Dad. I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision until the pixels ran together. It was the apology I had waited 10 years to hear. It was vindication. But vindication doesn't stop a predator. It just makes them hungrier. My father died on a Tuesday morning, a massive heart attack. The funeral was a spectacle of Veronica's design. She wore a black veil. She threw herself on the casket. She accepted condolences with the grace of a tragic queen. I stood at the back, numb, feeling like an intruder at my own father's memorial. 2 days later, the war began. Veronica summoned me to the reading of the will. She sat at the head of the table in the lawyer's office, flanked by Colton Reese. They produced a document dated 4 years ago, a will that left everything to Veronica Hale Hartwell, citing her unwavering devotion and explicitly disinheriting me due to estrangement and hostile conduct. It is what he wanted, Veronica said softly, wiping a dry eye. He wanted to make sure I was safe. He knew you had your career. I reached into my briefcase. My hands were steady. I pulled out the certified copy of the will my father had emailed me, the one filed just 2 weeks prior. Actually, I said, sliding it across the mahogany table, this is what he wanted. The silence in the room was absolute. Colton Reese picked up the document. His eyes scanned the date. His face went pale. Veronica snatched it from him. She read it. Her face didn't go pale. It went red. A deep, ugly flush that started at her neck and rose to her hairline. This is fake, she spat, throwing the paper down. He was on heavy medication. He didn't know what he was doing. You manipulated him. You probably typed this up and forced his hand while he was dying. It was filed with his original attorney, Veronica, I said calmly. It is notarized. It is legal. He was mentally incompetent, she screamed, standing up. The mask of the grieving widow fell away, revealing the cornered animal beneath. He had dementia. And you preyed on him, just like you attacked me, just like you broke my mother's vase. She turned to her lawyer. We are contesting this, she hissed. I want everything. I want her disbarred. I want the world to know she is a violent, manipulative abuser who took advantage of a dying man. Reese nodded, looking at me with a predatory gleam. We will file a petition to invalidate the new will based on undue influence and lack of capacity, and we will introduce character evidence regarding the defendant's history of domestic violence. I packed up my briefcase. I stood up. File whatever you want, I said. I walked out of the office, my head high, but inside, I was shaking. I knew what was coming. They were going to put me on trial. They were going to drag out the vase. They were going to make me the villain of the story one last time. I drove straight to the airport. I had a flight to catch back to Crescent Harbor to pack my things for the trial in Lakefield. But before I left, I called Aunt May. He is gone, May, I said. And she is suing. She is using the vase again. On the other end of the line, I heard the sound of a heavy metal door clicking open. It sounded like a safe. Let her, Aunt May said, her voice vibrating with a terrifying calm. Let her put that vase on the record. Let her swear under oath that it was priceless. Because, Lena, I just opened the blue folder, and I think it is time you saw what is inside. I didn't know it then, but the trap Veronica thought she was springing on me had actually been set for her, 10 years ago, by a music teacher who kept her receipts, and the snap was going to be deafening. If I thought the battle for my father's estate would be fought in a quiet courtroom with dusty law books and polite objections, I was naive. Veronica did not want a legal victory. She wanted a public execution. The attack began 3 days after the funeral. It didn't start with a summons. It started with the morning news. I was sitting in my kitchen in Crescent Harbor, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to ignore the pile of condolence cards I hadn't opened. When my phone buzzed, it was a text from a paralegal at my office. "Turn on Channel 8, now." I grabbed the remote. The screen flickered to life, showing the local morning show, a program usually dedicated to weather reports and cat rescues. But today, the guest was Veronica. She sat on a beige sofa, clutching a tissue, looking like a fragile, broken bird. She was wearing black, of course, a modest, high-necked dress that made her look like a grieving widow from a Victorian novel. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Widow claims stepdaughter manipulated dying husband." "It is not about the money," Veronica was saying, her voice trembling just enough to break hearts in living rooms across the state. "I don't care about the house. I don't care about the cars. But Daniel, he was vulnerable. He was confused. And she—" Veronica looked down, wiping a tear. "She took advantage of that. She forced him to sign papers he didn't understand." The host, a woman with sympathetic eyes, leaned in. "And you have had issues with his daughter before? This isn't new?" Veronica looked up, her eyes wide and terrified. "Oh, it has been years of fear. Years. I tried to be a mother to her. I really did. But she has this darkness, this anger." She paused for effect. "There was an incident a few years ago. I had this vase. It was the only thing I had left of my own mother, a beautiful antique. And Lena, in a fit of rage, she shattered it, just smashed it to pieces because she knew how much it meant to me. And when I tried to stop her, she attacked me. I dropped my coffee mug. It hit the floor. But unlike the vase, it didn't break. It just bounced, splashing lukewarm roast across my bare feet." "She attacked you?" the host gasped. "I still have nightmares about it," Veronica whispered. "And now, to think she used that same aggression to bully my poor, dying husband, it just breaks my heart." I turned the TV off. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't find the button at first. The silence in the apartment was deafening, but the damage was already screaming. By noon, the story had migrated from the television screen to the internet. A local tabloid ran a headline that made my stomach turn over. "Prosecutor with family darkness. Is Assistant DA Hartwell fit to serve?" The article didn't check facts. It didn't ask for my comment. It just reprinted Veronica's quotes and added a grainy photo of me leaving the funeral, looking grim and unapproachable. They questioned my moral judgment. They asked if a woman who abused her stepmother should be allowed to prosecute violent crimes. At 2 p.m, I was summoned to the district attorney's office. The walk through the bullpen was excruciating. Usually, this room was loud with phones ringing and lawyers arguing over plea deals. Today, it went silent as I passed. My colleagues, people I had shared lunches and late-night casework with, looked down at their desks. I was radioactive. District Attorney Marcus Thorne was a good man, a fair man, but he was also an elected official. He met me in the glass-walled conference room. Not his private office. It was a signal. This was formal. This was visible. "Lena," he said, not asking me to sit. "We have a problem." "It is a lie, Marcus," I said, my voice tight. "Everything she said on that news segment is a lie. She is contesting the will, and she is using the media to pressure me." "I believe you," Marcus said, and I think he meant it. But belief doesn't matter right now. Optics matter. We have 3 high-profile domestic assault cases on the docket next month. If you are the lead prosecutor, the defense attorneys are going to have a field day. They will wave that article in front of the jury. They will ask how the state can condemn their client when the prosecutor has a history of family violence. "I don't have a history of violence," I argued, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I have a stepmother with a history of fraud." "Prove it," Marcus said gently. "Until this civil suit is settled, until your name is cleared, I can't have you on the front lines. I am moving you to the appeals division, administrative duties, back office. You are burying me, I said. I am protecting the integrity of this office, he replied, his eyes hard. Clear this up. Lena, fix it. Then we can talk about your docket. I walked out of his office feeling like I had been stripped of my skin. Being a prosecutor wasn't just my job. It was my armor. It was the identity I had built to protect myself from being the victim. Now, Veronica had stripped that away too. But the assault was only beginning. That evening, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my apartment. It was from the law offices of Colton Reese. I opened it on my kitchen counter, pushing aside the takeout containers I hadn't touched. It was a motion to compel. Reese wasn't just asking for the will to be overturned. He was filing a motion for a mandatory independent psychological examination of the defendant, me. The legal argument was a masterpiece of twisted logic. Reese argued that my documented history of erratic behavior and violent outbursts, specifically citing the Vase incident, suggested a personality disorder that would make me capable of undue influence and elder abuse. He wanted a court-ordered shrink to pick apart my brain. He wanted to put me on the stand and ask me if I was crazy. And he had evidence. Attached to the motion was an exhibit labeled Exhibit C Correspondence. I flipped the page and felt the blood drain from my face. It was a series of emails I had sent to my father when I was 17, 18, 19, but they looked wrong. They were choppy, disjointed. Subject: Summer plans. Date: June 12th. 10 years ago. From Lena Hartwell to Daniel Hartwell. I hate her. I just want her to be gone. If she wasn't there, everything would be fine. I feel like I could just scream and break everything in that house. She makes me want to lose control. I remembered writing those emails, but I remembered the context. I had written, I hate how she treats you. I just want her to be gone so we can talk. If she wasn't there hovering over us, everything would be fine. I had written, I feel like I could just scream into a pillow. I am so frustrated I could break everything. But I won't. Veronica had accessed my father's email account. She had taken my teenage venting, my cries for help, and she had sliced them up with a digital scalpel. She had removed the context, the nuance, and the pain, leaving only the rage. She had turned a hurt daughter into a threatening psychopath. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the paperwork, and for the first time in years, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the walls were closing in. She was attacking my money, my reputation, my career, and my sanity. It was a total war. A knock at the door made me jump. I didn't answer. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. Lena, open up. I know you are in there. I saw your light. It was Alicia Ward, my colleague, the only other female prosecutor in the unit who didn't treat me like a competition. I opened the door. I must have looked like a wreck because Alicia's face softened instantly. She didn't say a word. She just walked in, carrying a bottle of wine and a box of donuts. Breakfast of champions, she said, setting them on the table. Then she looked at the mess of papers on the floor. Reese filed the motion for the psych eval? How did you know? I asked, rubbing my temples. Because Colton Reese is a predictable shark, Alicia said, kicking off her heels. He attacks the character first. If he can make you look crazy, nobody cares about the will. She sat down on the floor next to me and picked up the exhibit with the emails. She read them, her eyebrows shooting up. This is a hatchet job, she said. I have seen ransom notes with better flow than this. You can see where the sentences were cut. The judge won't know that, I said bleakly. Not without the originals, and Veronica has my father's computer. She probably deleted the originals the second she printed these. Lena, Alicia said, putting the paper down. You need a lawyer. I am a lawyer, I snapped. You are a prosecutor, she corrected. You are used to being on the offense. Right now, you are playing defense, and you are losing. You are too close to this. You are reading these emails and remembering how you felt when you wrote them. A lawyer will look at them and see a discovery violation. I can't hire a lawyer, I said, pacing the small room. Don't you see? That is what she wants. If I hire a high-priced estate litigator, I look like I am fighting for the cash. I look greedy. I need to be the grieving daughter who just wants her father's wishes respected. Screw the optics, Alicia said sharply. She stood up and grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. Listen to me. You are worried that hiring a lawyer makes you look like you have something to hide. But let me tell you something I learned from 10 years in felony court. A person is only afraid of exposing the past when they have a hell of a lot to hide. Veronica isn't afraid. She is throwing everything at you because she thinks you will fold. She thinks you are still that 19-year-old girl who ran away to the neighbors. She is winning. Alicia, my boss benched me. So get off the bench, Alicia said. Stop trying to be the noble victim. Be the prosecutor. Build a case. And get someone to argue it for you so you can stop shaking. My phone rang again. It was Aunt May. I picked up. May, I can't talk right now. It is a mess. I saw the news, May said. Her voice wasn't panicked. It was cold steel. And I saw the filing Reese sent to the court clerk an hour ago. It is public record. The psych eval? No, May said. The inventory. Veronica submitted a preliminary inventory of the estate assets to the court. She listed the personal property she claims she brought into the marriage. Item number 1. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The vase? The vase, May confirmed. She listed it as damaged family heirloom, destroyed by defendant. She put a value on it. Lena, she swore to the court, under penalty of perjury, that the vase was an original antique worth $50,000 at the time of destruction. I looked at Alicia. I looked at the mutilated emails on the floor. Aunt May continued. She just put the lie in writing. Lena, she just walked into the trap. Something inside me snapped. It was the sound of the last thread of hesitation breaking. I was done worrying about looking greedy. I was done worrying about looking like a bad daughter. Veronica had taken my career. She had taken my father's last days. She had taken my peace of mind. But she had just made a fatal error. She had put a price tag on a vase she had already cashed in. May, I said into the phone, do you still have the number for that lawyer you mentioned? The shark? Elliot Graves, May said. I have his card right here. Call him, I said. Tell him I am hiring him. Tell him I am not settling. Tell him I want to depose her. I hung up the phone. Alicia was watching me, a slow smile spreading across her face. Welcome back. I spent the next hour organizing the files. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't shaking. I was organizing evidence. The next morning, I walked into the district attorney's office. I didn't go to my desk. I went to the admin support station. I took the small brass nameplate off my desk. Assistant District Prosecutor Lena Hartwell. It felt heavy in my hand. I walked into Marcus Thorne's office. He looked up, surprised. Lena, I told you to take a few days. I am taking a leave of absence, Marcus, I said, placing the nameplate on his desk. Unpaid, indefinite. You don't have to do that, he said, frowning. The administrative transfer. I can't be an administrator right now, I said, and I can't be a prosecutor, not while I am a defendant. I looked at the nameplate one last time. It represented 5 years of 60-hour weeks. It represented the only thing that had made me feel safe. Giving it up felt like cutting off a limb. I am going to clear my name, I said, and when I come back for that nameplate, Marcus, I won't just be fit to serve. I will be the best damn prosecutor you have ever seen, because I will know exactly what it feels like to be the one in the chair. I turned and walked out. I was unemployed. I was being sued for millions. My reputation was in tatters. I was alone in an empty elevator descending to the parking garage. But as the doors opened, I checked my reflection in the chrome panel. I didn't look like the scared girl from the news. I looked like my Aunt May. I looked like a woman who knew where the bodies were buried, and I had just picked up a shovel. Veronica wanted a war? Fine. She was about to find out that she hadn't just raised a stepdaughter, she had raised a prosecutor, and I was coming for her. Elliot Graves did not have an office. He had a bunker disguised as a library. The walls were lined with mahogany bookshelves that smelled of old paper and aggression. Sitting across from him, I watched as he pinned a timeline to the corkboard he had set up on an easel. It was a timeline of Veronica's life, and it looked less like a biography and more like a criminal rap sheet. "You were not the first. Lena," Elliot said, uncapping a red marker. He was a man in his 60s with hair the color of steel wool and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed. "And your father wasn't the first either." We had spent the last 48 hours digging. I had used my prosecutorial instincts to hunt for public records, while Elliot used his network of private investigators to pull the things that weren't quite public. "Husband number 1, Elliot said, drawing a line at 1995. "Died of natural causes. Estate battle lasted 2 years. His children from a previous marriage were sued by Veronica for emotional distress regarding the distribution of jewelry. She won a settlement." "She settled?" I asked, leaning forward. "She always settles," Elliot said. "She pushes just hard enough to make it cheaper to pay her off than to fight her. Husband number 2, 2004, died of a stroke. She claimed his antique car collection was gifted to her verbally on his deathbed. The children fought it. She produced a witness, her own sister, who swore she heard it. She walked away with $300,000. "It is a pattern," I said, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. "She targets widowers with assets and estranged children." "It gets better," Elliot said, pinning a court document to the board. "Or worse, in 2008, she sued her own brother. The dispute was over a diamond bracelet she claimed was a family heirloom that he had lost. She filed an insurance claim on it first, collected the payout, and then sued him for the sentimental value gap." I stared at the board. "She double-dipped. She got the insurance money and the lawsuit money." "Exactly," Elliot said. "She treats grief like a business model, and the inventory is always the same: high value, sentimental items, jewelry, cars, and now, a vase." My phone buzzed. It was Alicia. "Check your secure email. I found something." I opened my laptop right there on Elliot's desk. Alicia had done exactly what I asked. She had run Veronica's name through the cross-agency fraud database. It was a risky move, one that required formal justification. But Alicia had logged it under background check for pending litigation involving a public official. Me. "What is it?" Elliot asked. "A suspended investigation," I read, scanning the PDF. 3 years ago, the State Insurance Fraud Bureau flagged Veronica for suspicious frequency of high-value property claims. They looked into a claim she made about a flood destroying a collection of Persian rugs. The investigator noted that the rugs looked like cheap reproductions in the photos provided, but the originals had conveniently been disposed of due to mold before the adjuster could arrive. "Let me guess," Elliot said dryly. "Insufficient evidence to prosecute?" "Case closed administratively," I confirmed, but the investigator left a note. "Subject exhibits classic signs of asset inflation and manufactured loss." "We can't use the suspended file directly as evidence of the Vase," Elliot mused, tapping his chin. "But it establishes character. It proves habit. Under the rules of evidence, we can argue this is her modus operandi." "We need more than a pattern," I said, standing up. "We need witnesses who were there for this specific lie. I need to go back to Aurora." I drove to my father's old neighborhood that afternoon. The house, my father's house, stood silent and empty, a for sale sign already planted in the lawn by Veronica's real estate agent. I didn't stop there. I drove 2 houses down to the Millers. They were older now. Mr. Miller walked with a cane, and Mrs. Miller's hair was completely white. But when they opened the door and saw me, their faces lit up with a mixture of recognition and sorrow. We sat in their living room, the same room where I had sat shivering with an ice pack on my hip 10 years ago. "I saw her on the news," Mrs. Miller said, pouring tea with a trembling hand. "That awful woman, saying you attacked her. I yelled right at the television." "I need you to tell the court what you saw that morning," I said gently. "Not just what you heard, what you saw on my arm." I remember it like it was yesterday, Mr. Miller said, his voice gravelly but firm. You came running across the lawn. You were limping. You had bruises on your upper arm, finger marks, 4 on the outside, 1 on the inside, grab marks. And the screaming, Mrs. Miller added. We were in the garden. We heard a crash, then silence for maybe 10 seconds. Then she started screaming. It didn't sound like fear. Lena. It sounded like theater, like she was projecting to the back row. She claimed I was the one screaming, I said. Lies. Mr. Miller spat. You were crying when you got here, but you were quiet, scared. The only person raging that day was Veronica Hale. We heard her through the open door. She was yelling at your father to look at what she did. She was setting the stage before the curtain even went up. I pulled 2 affidavits from my briefcase. Would you be willing to sign these? Swearing that I arrived injured and that the aggression you heard came from her? Give me the pen, Mr. Miller said without hesitation. I drove back to the city with the signed affidavits on the passenger seat. I had character evidence, I had a pattern, but I still didn't have the vase. I met Aunt May and Elliot at a secure conference room in downtown Denver that evening. May had brought the blue folder. She placed it on the table with the reverence of a priest placing a Bible on an altar. I have waited a long time for this, May said quietly. She opened the folder. Inside were 3 things. First, the photograph. May slid it across the table to Elliot. It showed Veronica in that kitchen, 14 years ago, and there, in the background, was the vase. Elliot put on his reading glasses. He leaned in close. The rim, he muttered. It is jagged, and there is a crack running down the side. It was broken in 1998, May said, long before Lena ever set foot in that house as an adult. Second, the insurance claim. May laid it down next to the photo. Claim number 8920. May read, filed in 2005, accidental breakage during cleaning, paid out in full, $50,000. Elliot looked up, a slow predatory smile spreading across his face. She cashed it in. She got paid for the vase. So the object sitting on the pedestal the night Lena visited was either a glued-together piece of junk or a cheap replica she bought to fill the space. I finished, my heart racing. She kept it there as a prop, and when she needed a weapon to use against me, she sacrificed it. But here is the dagger, May said. She pulled out the 3rd piece of paper. It was a printout of an email chain. How did you get this? Elliot asked. Daniel, May said, her voice softening. Before he died, he gave me his passwords. He told me to look. He was too scared to confront her himself, but he wanted me to know. She pointed to a highlighted paragraph in an email Veronica had sent to her best friend, a woman named Cheryl, dated 2 weeks after the insurance payout in 2005. I read it out loud. Can you believe the adjuster actually bought it? Easiest 50 grand I ever made. And the best part is, I found a place in Chinatown that sells a knockoff that looks almost exactly like it for $300. No one will ever know the difference. It is just going to sit on the shelf and look pretty anyway. The room went silent. She admitted it, I whispered. She admitted it was a scam in writing. She didn't just admit to insurance fraud, Elliot said, his voice low and dangerous. She admitted that the priceless heirloom she accused you of breaking was a $300 decoy. She sued you for emotional distress over a fake. This is it, I said. This is the end of her. Not yet, Elliot said. He stood up and began pacing. This proves she is a liar. But to truly bury her in court, we need to embarrass her. We need to catch her in the lie in real time. How? I asked. The vase she brought to court, Elliot said. The shards. She has them in an evidence box. She plans to present them to the jury to show the violence of your attack. Right. We need a specialist, Elliot said. I know a guy, Dr. Aris Thorne. He is a forensic ceramicist. He usually works with museums to identify forgeries. If we can get him to examine those shards in open court, he will see that it is modern porcelain. I realized. He will see the Made in China stamp if it is there, or he will date the clay. Exactly, Elliot said. We let her tell her sob story. We let her cry about her mother's legacy, and then we ask her to explain why her mother's legacy has a barcode on the bottom piece. There is one more thing, May said. She reached into the very back of the folder. I didn't just find paper. Lena, I made some calls. I called the number on the old insurance claim. The company? I asked. The agent, May corrected. He is retired now, living in Florida. But he remembers Veronica. Why would he remember a claim from 10 years ago? Elliot asked. Because she threw a stapler at him, May said with a grim smile. She went into the office to demand the check be expedited. She made such a scene that security had to escort her out. He remembers her name, he remembers the vase, and he remembers that she specifically asked if she could keep the pieces for sentimental reasons after they paid out. Usually, the insurance company takes the destroyed item, but she fought to keep the shards. Because she needed them to glue back together, I said, or to use as a model for the replica. He is willing to testify? Elliot asked. He said he would fly up on his own dime just to see her face when she gets caught, May said. Apparently, he really hated her. Elliot looked at the stack of evidence, the timeline, the Miller's affidavits, the photo, the insurance claim, the email, and the contact info for the retired agent. He closed the folder. Ladies, Elliot said, Veronica thinks she is walking into a hearing to destroy a reputation. She doesn't realize she is walking into a trap. I looked at the email one more time, the one where she called the insurance company idiots. She wanted the world to focus on the moment I broke the vase, I said, feeling the anger finally transform into cold, hard power. She wanted that crash to be the only thing that mattered. And we are going to show the judge, Elliot said, picking up the photo of the cracked vase from 14 years ago. That the vase was broken in her life long before you ever walked into that room. We aren't defending you against vandalism, Lena. We are prosecuting her for a decade of fiction. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. For the first time since the nightmare began, I didn't feel like the defendant. I felt like the prosecutor, and I was ready to deliver the opening statement of my life, the night before the trial. The silence in my small apartment was heavy enough to break bones. It was 3 a.m, and I was pacing the length of my living room, counting the steps. 12 steps from the window to the kitchenette. 12 steps back. I had walked this path 100 times in the last hour, wearing a groove into the cheap laminate flooring, trying to outwalk the terror that was nipping at my heels. I was not afraid of losing the money. I had lived on a prosecutor's salary for years. I knew how to budget, how to live small, how to survive on ramen and ambition. I could lose the house. I could lose the inheritance. What I was terrified of losing was the story. I walked to the window and looked out at the sleeping city of Lakefield. Somewhere out there, in a hotel suite that cost more per night than my monthly rent. Veronica was likely sleeping soundly, or perhaps she was rehearsing, practicing the way her voice would break when she talked about her violent stepdaughter. My fear was a cold, slimy thing in my gut. It whispered that even if I won the legal battle, even if the judge ruled in my favor, the stain would remain. The public loves a scandal more than they love the truth. The narrative of the unstable, jealous daughter attacking the grieving widow was cinematic. It was juicy. It was easier to digest than the complex, jagged reality of a 10-year-long con involving insurance fraud and emotional abuse. I was afraid that for the rest of my life, whenever someone Googled Lena Hartwell, they would see Veronica's version of me staring back. I thought back to my session with Dr. Evans earlier that afternoon. I had finally caved and used the referral Alicia gave me, needing a neutral space to decompress before the courtroom circus began. I sat in her beige office, twisting a ring on my finger until the skin turned red. What is the worst-case scenario, Lena? Dr. Evans had asked. She was a calm woman with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through my prosecutor's armor. That I win, I said, surprising myself. That you win? That I win the case, but I lose myself. I confessed, my voice shaking. That I walk out of that courtroom and I still feel like the 19-year-old girl who ran away. I'm afraid that no matter what the judge says, when I look in the mirror, I will see the monster Veronica says I am. She has been telling this story for so long. Doctor, sometimes I have to check my own memories just to make sure I didn't actually do it. That is what she does. She rewrites reality until you feel insane. You are not insane, Lena, Dr. Evans said firmly. You are gaslit. There is a difference. But to break the spell, you have to stop reacting to her story and start telling your own. I turned away from the window and looked at the stack of files on my table. Telling my own story. It sounded simple. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to do. My phone buzzed on the table. I ignored it. I knew who it was. Veronica had been texting me sporadically for days. Little psychological grenades lobbed over the trenches. A knock at the door made me jump. I checked the peephole. It was Aunt May. She was wearing her bathrobe over her clothes, her hair messy. She looked as sleepless as I felt. I opened the door, and she walked in, carrying the smell of the autumn wind and old tobacco. She had started smoking 1 cigarette a day again, a habit she had quit 20 years ago. I couldn't sleep, she said, sitting down on my couch. I kept thinking about tomorrow. Me too, I said, sitting beside her. We are ready, May. We have the evidence. We have the insurance agent. It is not the evidence I am worried about, May said. She looked down at her hands, the hands that had taught me to play piano, the hands that had held me when I cried. They were trembling. Lena, she said softly, I need to tell you something I have carried for 10 years. What is it? I asked, feeling a sudden spike of anxiety. That night, she said, the night you called me from the Miller's house, when I drove up and saw the bruises on you. You took me to the clinic. You saved me. I took you to the clinic, May corrected, her voice thick with regret. But I didn't take you to the police station. I paused. You said we needed to wait. You said it would be a he said, she said situation. That was the excuse I gave you, May said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were wet. But the truth? The truth is, I was afraid. I was afraid that if we called the police, it would destroy what was left of the family. I was afraid it would kill your father. I thought if we just stayed quiet, if we just absorbed the blow, we could keep the peace. I thought I was protecting you from a scandal. She reached out and took my hand. I was wrong, she whispered. I didn't protect you. I silenced you. By not standing up then. By not screaming the truth from the rooftops the moment she touched you. I gave her permission to keep lying. I let her control the narrative for a decade because I was too polite to make a scene. I stared at her. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just Veronica who had hurt me. It was the silence of the good people. My father had stayed silent to keep the peace. May had stayed silent to avoid a scandal. The neighbors had stayed silent because they didn't want to get involved. I had been surrounded by people who loved me, but who loved their comfort slightly more than they loved my truth. May, I said, my voice cracking, you were the only one who came for me. But I should have fought for you, she said fiercely. And tomorrow, I promise you, I will not be polite. I am done keeping the peace. I am ready to burn the whole house down if that is what it takes to clear your name. I squeezed her hand. We will burn it down together. Another knock at the door interrupted us. This time, it was Alicia. She breezed in, bringing a gust of cold air in a large manila envelope. She looked at May, then at me, and sensed the heavy emotional atmosphere. Okay, Alicia said, dropping her bag on the floor. I don't know what kind of tearjerker moment I just walked in on, but pause it. You need to see this. She handed me the envelope. What is this? I asked. More discovery from Reese? No, Alicia said. I went to the office tonight to clear out some files. I found this in your personal mail slot. It has been piling up while you were on leave. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of handwritten letters. Not typed legal documents. Handwritten notes on lined paper. On stationery. on the backs of greeting cards. I picked up the top one. Dear Ms. Hartwell, you probably don't remember me. You prosecuted my ex-husband 3 years ago. Everyone told me I was crazy. Everyone told me I provoked him. Even my own mother told me to go back to him. But you didn't. You looked at the evidence and you told me. I believe you. I'm writing this because I saw the news. I saw what they are saying about you, and I wanted you to know that they are wrong. You saved my life. Someone who saves lives isn't a monster. I picked up another one. It was from a young man, a former student I had helped when I volunteered at a legal aid clinic. Ms. Hartwell, don't let them win. You taught me that the truth is the only weapon that doesn't run out of ammo. We are rooting for you. There were 10, maybe 12 letters, messages from people I had fought for, people who had stood in the exact spot I was standing in now, accused, disbelieved, marginalized. You are not alone, Lena, Alicia said softly. You have an army. They are just quiet. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. For the first time all night, the crushing weight on my chest lightened. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every person who had ever been told that their abuse was their own fault. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up. It was a text from Veronica. I opened it. It was a long block of text, written in her signature flowery style. Lena, darling, I am sitting here looking at photos of your father and I'm just heartbroken. This has all gone too far. I know you are hurting. I know you are lashing out because you are in pain. I am willing to drop the lawsuit. I am willing to settle. Just sign a statement admitting that the will was a mistake. We can put this behind us. I know how fragile you are. Remember what Dr. Laudy said when you were 20? About your emotional regulation? I know you are not well. Sweetie, let me help you before you embarrass yourself in court tomorrow. My blood went cold. Dr. Laudy was the therapist I had seen for 6 months after the Vase incident to deal with the trauma. Veronica should not know his name. She certainly should not know what we discussed. She was referencing my private medical history. She was weaponizing my therapy against me. She is trying to scare me, I said, my voice hard. She is telling me she has my medical files. She is bluffing, May said. Or she stole them? She stole them, I said. She must have found an invoice in Dad's papers or hacked his email to find the correspondence. I didn't type a reply. I didn't engage. I didn't ask her how she knew. Instead, I took a screenshot. I opened my email app. I attached the screenshot and forwarded it to Elliot Graves with the subject line, Evidence of witness intimidation and potential HIPAA violation. Did you answer her? Alicia asked. No, I said, putting the phone down. I just gave my lawyer the final nail for her coffin. Good, May said, standing up. Now, put your shoes on. Why? I asked. It is almost 4 a.m. Because we need to go to one more place before the sun comes up, May said. Trust me. We drove in May's car. Alicia stayed behind to sleep on my couch. May drove us out of the city, towards the outskirts of Aurora. The streets were empty, bathed in the orange glow of streetlights. We pulled up to the curb in front of a large, white house. It was dark. The for sale sign in the yard was leaning slightly to the left. The windows were bare, stripped of the curtains Veronica had loved so much. Without the expensive furniture and the manicured landscaping, the house looked small. It looked ordinary. It was the house where I had been beaten, the house where I had been framed, the house where my father had died believing a lie. We got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, the cold air biting at our faces. I hated this place, I whispered. I felt like I couldn't breathe whenever I walked through that door. It is just a building, Lena, May said. It is wood and stucco and glass. It has no power over you, not anymore. She pointed to the dark window of the living room. Tomorrow, May said, you are not going into that courtroom to get money. You are not even going in there to get revenge. You are going in there to take back the pen. The pen? Veronica has been writing the story of your life for 10 years, May said. She wrote you as the villain. She wrote you as the broken, violent girl. Tomorrow, you take the pen back. You write the ending, and in your ending, the girl doesn't run away. She stands her ground. I looked at the house. I imagined the 19-year-old version of myself running out that front door, limping, terrified. I wanted to reach back through time and hold her. I wanted to tell her that it was going to take 10 years, but the cavalry was coming. "I am ready," I said, and I meant it. We drove back to my apartment as the sky began to turn a bruised purple in the east. I didn't sleep. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it felt raw. I put on my suit, a sharp navy blue suit that made me look like the prosecutor I was. I pulled my hair back. I applied my makeup with precision. Then, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my hallway. I looked at my eyes. They were tired. Yes, but they were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a witness who had seen the crime and survived to testify. I thought about the vase, the fake, cheap vase that had cost me my relationship with my father. Veronica had used it to shatter my life, but she had forgotten one thing about broken pieces. If you handle them carefully, they are sharp enough to cut. If I don't tell the story, I whispered to my reflection, Veronica will be the author of my life forever. I picked up my briefcase. I opened the door. The sun was up. It was time to go to court. The courtroom buzzed with a low, electric hum, the sound of 300 people trying to whisper at once. The gallery was packed. Reporters from every local affiliate and a few national blogs were squeezed into the back rows, their pens poised, hungry for the spectacle of the prosecutor versus stepmother showdown. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands clasped on top of a pristine manila folder. I was wearing my navy suit, the one I usually wore when I was the one asking the questions. Today, however, I felt the weight of the room pressing against my back. The doors opened, and a hush fell over the crowd. Veronica made her entrance. She looked frailer than she had on television. She was leaning heavily on Colton Reese's arm, clutching a lace handkerchief to her chest. She walked with a practiced hesitation, a performance of grief so calibrated it was almost art. On the plaintiff's table, placed prominently in a glass evidence box, were the shards of the blue and white vase. They were arranged like the bones of a saint. Colton Reese began his opening statement with the theatricality of a revival preacher. He paced in front of the jury box, gesturing first to the weeping widow, then to the broken pottery, and finally, with a pointed finger, at me. "We are here today because of a pattern," Reese boomed, his voice rich with manufactured outrage. "A pattern of abuse, a pattern of jealousy. We are here because a devoted wife, who sacrificed her career to save her husband's estate, has been victimized not once, but twice. First, physically, by a stepdaughter who could not control her rage, and now, legally, by that same woman attempting to manipulate the final wishes of a dying man." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "You will hear testimony that Lena Hartwell is volatile," Reese continued. "You will hear that she destroyed the only tangible memory Mrs. Hartwell had of her own mother, and you will see that this document she claims supersedes all others, is nothing more than the final act of that violence." I stared straight ahead. I did not flinch. "Call your first witness," Judge Holloway said. Elliot Graves stood up. He didn't look at the jury. He looked at me. "The defense calls Lena Hartwell," he said. A ripple of surprise went through the room. It was a risky move to put the defendant on the stand first, exposing them to cross-examination before the case was even built. But Elliot and I had agreed. We needed to pop the blister of Veronica's narrative immediately. I walked to the stand. I swore the oath. I sat down. "Ms. Hartwell," Elliot asked, his voice conversational. "How old were you on the night of June 12th, 10 years ago?" "I was 19, I said. "And on that night, did you break the vase currently sitting on the plaintiff's table?" "No," I said clearly. "I did not." "Tell us what happened." I took a breath. I looked at the jury. I didn't tell the story like a lawyer. I told it like the teenager I had been. I described the phone call. I described the fear for my father's heart. I described the way Veronica had shoved me into the table, the sharp pain in my hip, and the terror that made me run out the front door in my pajamas. "I didn't run because I was guilty," I said, my voice steady. "I ran because I had never been hit by an adult before, and I was scared she was going to do it again." Colton Reese stood up for cross-examination with a shark-like grin. "Ms. Hartwell," he said, leaning on the railing, "you claim you were scared, but isn't it true that you have a temper? Isn't it true that you have destroyed property before?" "No," I said. "Really?" Reese raised an eyebrow. "We have a statement from a college roommate who says she saw you crush a cup and throw it across the room during finals week. Is that the behavior of a calm person?" I paused. I could feel the trap. If I denied it, I looked like a liar. "I was 19 and running on 3 hours of sleep during finals," I said honestly. "I crushed a paper coffee cup because I got a B on a practice exam. I threw it into a trash can. I did not assault a human being. There is a difference between stress and violence. Mr. Reese." A few jurors nodded. Reese frowned, realizing he hadn't gotten the rise out of me he wanted. He sat down. Elliot didn't waste time. He began the parade. First came the Millers. Mrs. Miller, with her white hair and soft cardigan, looked like everyone's grandmother. She told the court exactly what she heard. "It wasn't a scream of fear," she told the jury, looking directly at Veronica. "I was an actress in community theater for 40 years. I know a stage scream when I hear one." That woman waited until the crash stopped, took a breath, and then projected her voice so the whole street would hear her play the victim. Next came Dr. Henderson, the physician who had treated me that night. He projected the photos of my injuries onto the court screens. The room went silent. The bruising on my arm was distinct. "These are not defensive wounds from someone flailing," the doctor explained, pointing to the 4 finger-shaped marks on my bicep. "These are compression injuries. Someone grabbed this young woman with significant force and held her. The injury to her hip is consistent with a high-velocity impact against a blunt edge, like a table corner." Veronica shifted in her seat. She whispered something to Reese, who looked annoyed. Then, Elliot called Dr. Aris Thorne. Dr. Thorne was a forensic ceramicist who usually spent his time dating pottery shards from Roman digs. He walked to the stand carrying a small specialized microscope. "Dr. Thorne," Elliot said, "did you examine the shards in evidence box A?" "I did," Thorne said, his voice dry and academic. "And what is your conclusion regarding the age of the object?" "The plaintiff claims this is a 19th century Delft vase," Dr. Thorne said, adjusting his glasses. "However, the clay composition contains trace elements of polymer additives that were not used in ceramic firing until the late 1990s. Furthermore, under magnification, I found a partial stamp on the base shard." "And what does the stamp say?" Elliot asked. "It is a partial barcode," Dr. Thorne said, "and the manufacturer's mark for a company called Home Accents International. This vase was mass-produced. I would date its manufacture to approximately 15 or 20 years ago. Its retail value would be roughly $300. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Veronica sat perfectly still, her face a mask of stone. "So," Elliot said, turning to the jury, "this is not a priceless antique?" "It is a very nice reproduction," Dr. Thorne said, "but it is about as antique as my laptop." Colton Reese objected, but the damage was done. The jury was looking at the box of shards differently now. It wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a prop. "Your Honor," Elliot said, "the defense has one final witness before we recall the plaintiff. We call May Turner." Aunt May walked to the stand. She looked small in the big chair, but her voice was clear. She testified about the night she picked me up. She testified about the years of silence. "Why didn't you call the police?" Elliot asked gently. May looked at me. Tears welled in her eyes. "Because I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting the family. I thought if we just kept quiet, the violence would stop. I was wrong. I am sorry. Lena, I should have screamed the house down that night." She wiped her eyes and turned to the judge. "But I am not quiet anymore, and I brought the receipts." Elliot walked to his table and picked up the blue folder. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It went from tense to dangerous. "Your Honor," Elliot said, "I would like to enter Defense Exhibit D into evidence." He handed a photograph to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge, and then displayed it on the screen. It was the photo of Veronica in the kitchen, 14 years ago. "This photo was taken 4 years before the alleged incident," Elliot said. "Please look at the background." He zoomed in. The crack in the vase was visible. The missing chunk was visible. "The vase was already broken," Elliot stated. Veronica gasped. It was the first genuine sound she had made all morning. And Elliot continued, pulling out a document. "This is an insurance claim filed by Veronica Hale, 2005, 3 years prior to the night she accused my client. The claim is for the total destruction of an antique Delft vase. The payout was $50,000. The courtroom erupted. The O was audible, a collective intake of breath from 300 people. "Order!" Judge Holloway banged his gavel, his face stern. "Order, or I will clear the court." But Elliot wasn't done. "One final document," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "An email from the plaintiff to a friend, dated 1 week after the insurance payout." He put it on the screen. The words were 10 feet tall. "Can you believe the adjuster actually bought it? Easiest 50 grand I ever made. And the best part is, I found a place in Chinatown that sells a knockoff that looks almost exactly like it. Milking the idiots." Veronica stood up. "That is private. You hacked my email." "Sit down, Mrs. Hartwell," the judge barked. Reese looked at his client, his face draining of color. He knew. He knew right then that his career was taking a hit. "We recall Veronica Hale Hartwell to the stand," Elliot said. "Veronica had to walk past me to get to the witness box. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. She looked like a ghost. She sat down. She tried to compose herself, tried to summon the tears, but the audience wasn't buying it anymore. They had seen the email. They knew the script. Elliot stood in front of her. He didn't yell. He didn't pace. He just leaned against the railing and looked at her with pity. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, "I have one question." Veronica glared at him, her lip trembling. "If the vase sitting on that table was the unique, priceless legacy of your dead mother," Elliot said, gesturing to the shards, "then why did you accept a check for its death 3 years before my client ever walked into the room?" I, Veronica stammered. "There were 2 vases. It was a set." "A set?" Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Because in your deposition, you said it was one of a kind. You said it was unique, and in the insurance claim, you listed it as a single item." "I was confused," Veronica cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "I was grieving. My husband is dead, and you are bullying me about paperwork." "I am not bullying you about paperwork," Elliot said cold. "I am asking you why you beat a 19-year-old girl over a $300 replica of a vase you had already cashed in." "I didn't beat her," Veronica screamed, standing up in the box. "She is crazy. She is the violent one. She ruined everything. She turned Daniel against me." "No," Elliot said softly. "You did that yourself when you scammed him." "I needed the money," Veronica yelled, and then clamped her hand over her mouth. The silence that followed was absolute. She had said it. She had admitted the motive. "No further questions," Elliot said. I watched Veronica crumble. She sank back into the chair, looking frantically at Colton Reese, but he was busy studying the grain of the wood on his table. He wasn't going to save her. No one was going to save her. I looked at the judge. He was writing furiously in his notebook. I looked at the jury. They weren't looking at Veronica with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her with disgust. Then I looked at Aunt May in the front row. She was weeping, but she was smiling. She gave me a small nod. The vase was broken. The lie was broken. And for the first time in 10 years, I was whole. Veronica stood in the witness box, her chest heaving, her face flushed with a chaotic mix of rage and panic. The silence in the courtroom was not empty. It was heavy, pressing down on her like a physical weight. She had just admitted that she needed the money. She had just admitted, in front of a jury, a judge, and 36 reporters, that the foundation of her lawsuit was built on financial desperation rather than maternal grief. "I misspoke," Veronica cried out, her voice cracking. She looked wildly toward the judge, her hands gripping the railing of the stand so hard her knuckles turned white. "I was confused, Your Honor. The paperwork. There was so much paperwork after Daniel died. I was overwhelmed with grief. I did not mean to say I needed the money. I meant to say that the principle of the matter was costly. It was a clerical error. I simply forgot about the insurance claim from 10 years ago because I was so traumatized by the attack." Judge Holloway peered over his spectacles. He did not look impressed. He picked up his pen and made a slow, deliberate note on his legal pad. The scratching of the pen against the paper was the only sound in the room. "You forgot that you received $50,000? The judge asked, his tone dry. "That is a significant sum to misplace in one's memory, Mrs. Hartwell." "I have been under so much stress," Veronica sobbed, reverting to her reliable tactic of weaponized fragility. "I am a widow, and this woman, this prosecutor, she is twisting everything. She is confusing me with legal tricks." "I am not confusing you, Veronica," Elliot Graves said. Stepping forward, he looked calm, almost bored, which only made Veronica look more unhinged. "I am clarifying the timeline, and I have one final piece of evidence to help clarify it further." Elliot turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense moves to introduce Exhibit E. It is a digital audio file recovered from the decedent's cloud storage account. It was recorded 3 weeks before Daniel Hartwell passed away." "Objection!" Colton Reese shot up from his chair, but he looked pale. He knew he had lost control of his client, and now he was losing control of the evidence. "We have not had time to authenticate this recording. It was provided in the supplemental discovery packet delivered to your office yesterday morning. Mr. Reese," Elliot countered smoothly, "if you did not listen to it, that is not my client's problem." "Overruled," Judge Holloway said. "Play the recording." Elliot nodded to the bailiff. The room went deathly still. I held my breath. I knew what was on this recording. Aunt May had played it for me the night before, and it had broken my heart and put it back together in the same 3 minutes. A hiss of static filled the courtroom speakers. Then, a voice. It was my father. His voice was weak, breathless, the sound of a man whose heart was failing him, but the words were distinct. "Veronica, please, stop shouting." Then, Veronica's voice, sharp and shrill, echoing from the recording. "I will stop shouting when you sign the amendment. She is going to steal everything, Daniel. She is dangerous. Do you remember the vase? Do you remember how she looked when she smashed it?" A pause, a heavy sigh from my father. "The vase was already broken, Ronnie. We both know that." The courtroom gasped again. Veronica froze in the witness box, her eyes going wide with horror. The recording continued. "It doesn't matter," Veronica's voice on the tape screamed. "She is the one who destroyed this family. She is the one who needs to be cut out. Sign the paper, Daniel, or I swear to God I will make sure everyone knows she abused me. I will ruin her career. I will tell the press she is unstable." My father's voice came back, sad and resigned. "I will sign it. I will sign whatever you want. Just leave her alone. Just stop the lies." "It is not a lie if people believe it," Veronica snapped on the tape. Then came the line that Elliot had saved for the end. My father's voice, sounding closer to the microphone, as if he had leaned in to make sure the device caught every syllable. "Lena did not break that vase. Veronica, it only broke the illusion that you could play the victim forever." Elliot clicked the remote. The audio cut off. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a total, catastrophic collapse. I looked at Veronica. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the empty air, her mouth slightly open. The mask was gone. There was no grieving widow left. There was only a con artist who had been caught on tape blackmailing a dying man. Colton Reese stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He did not look at Veronica. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor," Reese said, his voice devoid of its earlier bluster, "I must inform the court that as an officer of the law, I was not made aware of the insurance history or the existence of this recording by my client. Had I known, my counsel would have been different." It was the legal equivalent of throwing her out of a moving car. Reese was protecting his law license. He was effectively telling the judge that his client had lied to him, too. "Noted. Mr. Reese," Judge Holloway said grimly. The judge turned his gaze to Veronica. It was a look of pure judicial ice. "Mrs. Hartwell," the judge said, "you may step down, and I suggest you do not leave the jurisdiction." Veronica stumbled down from the stand. She didn't go back to her table. She sat in the front row of the gallery, alone. Even her own lawyer moved his chair a few inches away from her. We did not have to wait long for the verdict. In a bench trial of this nature, specifically regarding the validity of a will, the judge could rule immediately after closing arguments. But Judge Holloway didn't even ask for closing arguments. He had heard enough. "In the matter of the estate of Daniel Hartwell," Judge Holloway announced, his voice booming through the room, "the court finds the testimony of the plaintiff, Veronica Hale Hartwell, to be fundamentally unreliable and riddled with perjury." I gripped the edge of the table. Aunt May reached over the barrier and squeezed my shoulder. "The evidence presented by the defense," the judge continued, "specifically the insurance documents and the audio recording, proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the plaintiff engaged in a systematic campaign of deception. She fabricated a narrative of domestic violence to alienate the decedent from his daughter and to justify the alteration of his estate plan." He looked directly at me. "The court rules that the will dated 4 years ago was signed under duress and based on fraudulent pretenses. It is hereby invalidated. The will dated 3 weeks prior to the decedent's death, leaving the majority of the estate to Lena Hartwell, is recognized as the true and valid last testament of Daniel Hartwell." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 10 years. A tear slid down my cheek, hot and fast. "Furthermore," the judge added, his eyes narrowing at Veronica, "this court is referring the evidence of insurance fraud and the transcript of today's admission to the district attorney's office for a criminal investigation. Mrs. Hartwell, you are ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the defendant. Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot ending a war. Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions. The gallery buzzed, but I didn't hear any of it. I just turned to Aunt May. We didn't say anything. We just hugged. It was a fierce, desperate hug. Two soldiers who had survived the trenches. "We did it," May whispered in my ear. "We fixed the memory." We walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. The press was waiting. A wall of cameras and microphones greeted us. Ms. Hartwell, how do you feel about the verdict?" "Lena, do you have a comment on your stepmother's admission?" "Is it true you are going to press charges?" I stopped. I looked at the cameras. I saw the red lights blinking. I thought about the 19-year-old girl who had run away in shame. I thought about the nameplate sitting in my drawer. I stepped up to the microphones. "For 10 years, I said, my voice steady and projecting to the back of the crowd. "A story was told about me. It was a story about a broken vase and a violent daughter. Today, the court proved that the only thing broken in that house was the truth." I paused, looking straight into the lens of the camera that had broadcast Veronica's lies just days before. "The vase was not the only thing that was shattered," I said. "Trust was shattered. A father's protection was shattered. But today, at least, the truth has been glued back together, and it is strong enough to hold water." I turned to leave. "Lena!" The voice was desperate. I stopped. Veronica was pushing through the crowd. She looked disheveled. Her mascara was running. She reached out, trying to grab my arm, but Aunt May stepped in front of her, blocking her path like a concrete wall. "Lena, please," Veronica pleaded, ignoring May and looking at me over my aunt's shoulder. "I am ruined. They are going to take everything. The civil investigation. I could go to jail." "You should have thought of that before you cashed the check," I said coldly. I am your mother, she cried, playing her last card. I raised you. I was the only mother you had for years. Doesn't that mean anything? We are family. The hallway went quiet. Everyone waited for my answer. I looked at the woman who had shoved me into a table. I looked at the woman who had stolen my teenage years. I looked at the woman who had made my father die thinking he had to protect me from myself. Then I looked at Aunt May, the woman who had driven through the night to save me, the woman who had kept every receipt, the woman who had taught me that justice was about balance. No, Veronica, I said. You were never my mother. You were just the woman my father married. I put my arm around May's shoulders. This, I said, gesturing to my aunt, this is the person who stood up when I couldn't, the person who shows up when you are broken, not the one who breaks you. That is what family is. I turned my back on her. Come on, Aunt May, I said. Let's go get some lunch. I am starving. We walked away. We didn't look back. Behind us, I heard Veronica start to sob. But for the first time in my life, the sound didn't make my stomach knot. It just sounded like noise, background noise, fading into the distance. 3 weeks later, the desert sun of Santa Fe was just as bright and saturating as I remembered. I sat at Aunt May's kitchen table. The smell of baked apples filled the air. It was quiet, save for the wind chimes on the porch. On the table between us sat the old cardboard shoebox, the one May had put on the top shelf of my closet when I was 12. Are you ready? May asked, sipping her coffee. I think so, I said. I opened the lid. Inside were the crayon drawings, hundreds of them, stick figures with big smiles, the little girl with yellow hair, the tall man, the woman with the red lips, the tall building in the city. I picked up a drawing of the three of us, Daniel, Veronica, and me, standing in front of a mansion. I looked at it. I remembered the little girl who had drawn it, desperate to believe that if she just drew the picture perfectly enough, the reality would follow. I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it wasn't bitter. She looks happy, I said, tracing the smile of the stick figure girl. She didn't know yet. She knows now, May said. I sorted through the pile. I found another drawing, buried at the bottom. It was one I must have drawn right before I left for college. It wasn't of the city. It was of a small yellow house with a piano in the window, and two figures standing on the porch, one tall, one small. I am keeping this one, I said, holding up the picture of May and me. And the rest? May asked. I looked at the pile of fantasies, the drawings of a family that never existed. Recycle bin, I said. We don't need to keep the packaging for a product we returned. May laughed. It was a bright, clear sound. We spent the rest of the afternoon drinking coffee and listening to Rachmaninoff, the past finally resting quietly in the recycling bin where it belonged. The following Monday, I walked into the Crescent Harbor District Prosecution Unit. The bullpen was loud. Phones were ringing. Lawyers were shouting. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I walked to my desk. It was exactly as I had left it, covered in files. I opened my bag and took out the brass nameplate, Assistant District Prosecutor Lena Hartwell. I slid it back onto the metal holder. Click, it snapped into place. Nice to see that back where it belongs, a voice said. I looked up. It was Marcus Thorne, the district attorney. He was leaning against the doorframe, smiling. The fraud division in Colorado sent over the referral for your stepmother, he said. They are throwing the book at her. Insurance fraud, perjury, attempted grand larceny. She is going to be tied up in court for the next 5 years. Good, I said. Justice takes time. We have a walk-in, Marcus said, gesturing to the lobby. Young kid, 19, says his stepfather kicked him out and stole his tuition money. He is scared. He doesn't want to file a report because he thinks no one will believe him. I felt a spark in my chest. Send him in, I said. A moment later, a young man walked in. He looked terrified. He was wearing a backpack that looked like it contained everything he owned. He looked at the floor, his shoulders hunched, expecting to be dismissed. Have a seat, I said, pointing to the chair across from me. He sat down, clutching his bag. I don't have much proof, he stammered. It is just my word against his, and he is really good at lying. I opened my drawer. I pulled out a file, not a case file. It was a copy of the transcript from my own trial. I kept it there to remind me. I looked at the kid. I saw the fear. I saw the shame. I saw the belief that he was alone. "What is your name?" I asked. "Leo," he whispered. "Leo," I said, leaning forward and looking him dead in the eye. "My name is Lena, and I want you to listen to me very carefully." He looked up. "I believe you," I said. His eyes widened. "And I know exactly what it feels like to be sitting in that chair," I continued. "It took me 10 years to learn how to stand up to the person who stole from me. But you are not going to wait 10 years, because I am going to teach you how to do it right now." I opened a fresh notepad. I picked up my pen. "Start from the beginning," I said, "and don't leave anything out." Leo took a deep breath. For the first time, his shoulders dropped. He started to talk, and as I wrote down his story, I knew that this was the real victory. Veronica had tried to break me to silence me. Instead, she had created a voice that would speak for everyone who couldn't speak for themselves. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and redemption. If you enjoyed seeing the truth finally come to light, please let us know in the comments where you are listening from. We love hearing from our global community. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that like button so we can share more powerful stories with people who need to hear them.